Do you think we're heading in that direction?
In a Total Recall direction, or
Like all of these cyberpunk futures.
oh yeah, most definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head when you whenever you say that we're heading into a cyberpunk like kind of like future. We're definitely heading into like a dystopic, like connect your brain into the cybernetics kind of future. And whether good or bad, like there's certainly a lot of good things with that, but there's going to be a lot of bad things with that. Something that I've always felt strongly about, that I've talked about over the years, and I've mentioned to you earlier, is coronal mass ejections. But there's a specific scenario that I have in my head that if a coronal mass ejection were to happen on a cyberpunk dystopic society, it would go way worse than I think what even we think is possible. So like given like if hundreds of or millions of people decide to put like chips in their head, what could potentially happen is if a coronal mass ejection fires out and hits Earth, all those people with chips in their heads could immediately fry. Same thing with pacemakers. No offense to anybody that has a pacemaker. That sucks. You need it to survive. But if there was a coronal mass ejection, that pacemaker could literally fry inside of you. It'll happen to anybody with any kind of cybernetics or anything inside of them. Their entire left or right half of their body could just stop working. All of a sudden, just they could fall down and not be able to use half their body. And at that point, I think they would just shut down. No pun intended.
But what if by this time in the future, the planet is covered in an array of satellites that form some sort of field that can protect us from these?
I don't know if there's enough satellites that you can form as an array or a field that would protect us from a coronal mass ejection, especially one that's big enough to touch our atmosphere like that. It would literally fry everything. There was something in the 1800s called the Carrington event, and from what I remember reading about, it pretty much it was this event where there was a coronal mass ejection, a solar flare, a really big solar flare from the sun. And what it did is we had all these telegraph wires or telegram wires around the United States. We had almost no electronics at all. But from what I was reading about, it completely fried all the telegraph wires around like the world. Literally any slight little tiny little bit of electronic thing that we had at this time, which was not much, got fried, and if I'm not mistaken, even potentially caught on fire. So imagine the level of energy it takes to do that, to set something on fire. And yeah, sure, maybe we'll have satellites around there, but what I think will happen is those satellites will just get hit with a wave of radiation and just fall out of the sky. And by this time, what we'll have to worry about is coronal mass ejections or solar flares happening, causing satellites to just right out of the sky. I think that's going to be a major issue one day. And I was actually, I saw a number, I think it was today or yesterday, and it was the number of satellites in the sky just in the past 20 years has risen so much, and we have thousands of satellites in the sky. So many. It's crazy. But imagine all those just coming down at once. Imagine planes falling from the sky because of a solar flare that just happens out of nowhere. It's scary.
Do you think that we should like? Hmm. Do you think we should just go underground?
I see where you're going with this, but I don't know. I feel like I don't think we should go underground, but I think we should know our limits. I think we shouldn't test our boundaries so much and test our limits, and we should have common sense. I think and I love the age that we're living in because there's so many countless boundaries that we can explore like in human nature, in society, in everything. There's so many different things that we can explore on a basic level that can help society and that can push us further and further and further. And I think with all of those stars in our eyes, so to speak, we start to almost lose sight of things that can be common sense that we've experienced before, that one day we're going to experience again, and it's going to, because of all this stuff that we've built up around it, that we put no safety pins around because we've never experienced it in our lifetime. One day it could just come and just take us out, or just rob us of something that we have. Like, we could be sent into the dark ages again for like a couple months and maybe even years because of something like this happening, and that would be crazy.
So this makes me think about the idea of like the Great Resets, Great Civilization resets, and how I think I forgot what it was, like 12,000 years or 12,000 something. Maybe it was less, give or take a few thousand, and how interesting would it be if like there was a flood, but what if every time it resets it's something else, and like our Great Reset could be this?
Yeah. You know what really I always wondered about, like, they say that like all these like ancient civilizations and ancient societies, and that we've experienced all of this anachronistic things because we've all experienced everything before. We've discovered nuclear energy at one point before, and then our society crumbled and everything like that. What wouldn't there be traces though of like all this stuff? And I know that that's like a very skeptical thing to say, but I always wondered about that. Like, why haven't we and maybe the government keeps it secret. Maybe that's part of it too. Is that like we haven't found all this stuff because, you know what I mean, they don't want you to see it in like the Vatican, or like all these
There's
organizations that run the world don't want you to know that technology and all of this stuff has been created before.
Yeah, I think there are sites, like ancient sites, like really, really some of the earliest sites possible. I think they do have signs of radiation.
Oh yeah, there's a site in India that they think that there's a passage in the Mahatma Varita is based on, and that it actually contained a an alien fight or a spaceship battle, and that actually had a nuclear bomb set off, and that you can find like slight traces of radiation in this area, and like sand that like has been glassed over, like it's been like caught fire really quick, which is kind of crazy if you think about it.
You know what's scary to think about too?
What?
You know how there's UFOs, and only until the internet, all of like all the world, all these different countries and across all the continents, it was hard. Like, say this is real, right? They could have been doing all the shit in some point on the planet, but then like just over on the other side of the planet, there's people living and not having to deal with alien gods. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but I feel like so a lot of the theories though state that, yeah, the alien gods visited these people over here, but they also visited everybody like all over the planet. Like, there's a major theory about the Anunnaki that pretty much says that a lot of different alien races sewed all like different people from around the globe and genetically altered all the different people, and different alien races came and enslaved different people even.
That's like the translation of the isn't that what I forget who translated it, but that was like that's the translation of the text of what the Anunnaki are.
Yeah, that might be what that original guy said. But I don't know. He might have been bullshitting, but I think that that could be potentially like a real thing, is that happening. Because I
I
don't know.
agree.
You know what I mean? I feel like with the amount of flood stories that each religion and society has, and just look at the what is it, the Black Sea or the Mediterranean Ocean? Look at the Mediterranean Ocean. Look at how many ancient societies are literally just underneath the Mediterranean Ocean. And if you go under, you can find all these ancient statues, all these ancient buildings. They weren't just making these underwater. They were making them, and then just something cataclysmic happened, like a major tsunami just came and wiped out everything, or something. You know what I mean? That's what happened. It wasn't like they just they built all this shit underwater. There's even
I
did you
do. There's sites like that across all the oceans too. Like
across
what's
exactly?
the
That's what I'm saying.
Bimini
I was
Road? The Bimini
Yes,
Road.
exactly. The one that we were talking about with Atlantis that one time. There's one that I was looking at recently that they found under Lake Michigan, and it's like a Stonehenge that they found under Lake Michigan. You know how old that has to be, dude? A Stonehenge under Lake Michigan? It's like 10,000 years old. That's crazy. That's astounding. That's like the first remnants of man making something like that.
Well, I think that so like we said, there were resets, and you know, who knows what's here. The stories about like giants in America told by Native Americans.
No, I don't. Well, so I know of it, but I don't know the story.
Look it up because I could not tell you it.
Several Native American cultures feature stories of giants, often described as large, powerful beings who may be benevolent, malevolent, or simply different from humans. So pretty much anything. These stories can involve giants being defeated by heroes, battling other supernatural creatures, or simply being part of the natural world. In Navajo tradition, the big giant is a fearsome creature from the early world who devoured humans, but was eventually defeated by heroes. Navajo also have stories of giants being killed by heroes, such as Born for the Water and Monster Slayer. The Sioux. The Sioux believe in a race of giants created by the Great Spirit who were arrogant and denied the existence of a creator. They were destroyed by a flood, after which humans were created. Uh-oh, there we go. While not necessarily mythical, Captain John Smith described the Susquehannock as giants, though later research suggests they were taller than average Native Americans, but not as exceptionally large as Smith claimed. Wow. The northern Paiute have stories of cannibalistic giants, and some versions of their stories even suggest a war between the Paiutes and the giants, with the Paiutes eventually using fire to suffocate with the Paiutes eventually using fire to suffocate the giants in a cave, according to a paper from the Nevada State Library Archives and Public Records. Chickasaw and the Natchez tribes have stories of a race of giants called the Chicalas who roam the area that is now Tennessee. And the Paiutes also have oral traditions about a race of white giants described as red-haired. Huh, that last one's weird. Ancient race of white giants described in native legends.
You were describing a Stonehenge underneath Lake Michigan.
Yeah, I looked it up.
A lot of these sites that are underneath water, like deep underneath water. I wonder if they could ever get like a DNA sample from any of those sites. Probably not. But
Yeah, probably not.
how cool would that be?
Yeah, that would be cool. It would be hard to get a DNA sample. It's hard enough even getting a DNA sample from like
You'd have
rocks
to
and
find
shit.
like a container. You'd have to find like some container that was left untouched that you could open up that might have something in it.
Yeah, like some pottery or something like that. That somebody sliced their hand open into, or left their fingers in. I don't know. Lake Michigan Stonehenge, the structure located approximately 40 feet underwater, features a mile-long line of stones, with one stone bearing a carving of a mastodon. Did you hear that? A carving of a
Wait,
mastodon.
what?
Features a mile-long set of stones, with one stone bearing a carving of a mastodon. A mastodon was an ancient Native American elephant that was said to be like bigger than the Asian elephant, if I'm not mistaken. And it was, I think it was like the biggest elephant, I think, at the time. But it was native to North America. True story. An ancient mini Stonehenge stands underwater in the Grand Traverse part of Michigan. I didn't know this was a new thing. Looking for shipwrecks in this area, which was a busy 19th and 20th century maritime trade route, Mark Hawley, professor of underwater archaeology at Northwestern Michigan University, first came across a rock that he said bears a prehistoric carving of a mastodon. On further investigation, he discovered a Stonehenge-like arrangement of ancient stones. There's an outer ring of stones about 40 feet in diameter and an inner ring about 20 feet in diameter, both made of local granite. They stand 40 feet below the water surface, and the stones are some 9,000 years old, making this one of the oldest structures ever discovered in North America. At that time, said Holly, the lake bed was dry. Stonehenge would not be erected for another 4,000 years. Holly points out that the stones are not anything like the size of those at Stonehenge, instead ranging in size from that of a basketball to that of a compact car. There's also a number of stones arranged in a line over 1 mile long. Do you see that? That's pretty cool. What does it mean? Lake Michigan Stonehenge. Holly has not revealed the precise location of the site, which is in an area popular among recreational divers. He instead first revealed its location to the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa tribes as a gesture of respect. Holly has pointed out that many experts would prefer to investigate such stones in person to authenticate them, but that these experts aren't necessarily trained scuba divers, which has slowed down the authentication process. Cool. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
I didn't realize it was like so like recent. That says a lot about that says a lot about humanity and North American ancient like civilizations that we were alongside the mastodon and we're even documenting it. That's pretty amazing.
Some people think it goes further than that. 'Cause I'm pretty
Oh,
sure
of course.
there's like sculptures or like reliefs of dinosaurs.
Well, yeah, in I think you're talking about in like South America, if I'm not mistaken. They have a like carvings of what is it? Stegosaurus, the one that's got all the spikes on him?
I
Yeah.
think so. I
Yeah,
believe
there was
so.
like they found like carvings of like stegosauruses. They found carvings of sorry, not dinosaurs, but dragons all around the world. What do you think about the fact that like dragons are found in every culture? What do you think a dragon is?
I mean, I think a dragon is a realistic biology for like a reptile that flies. You know, and we like obviously there's pterodactyls, but maybe similar to like these giant stories. What if like giants and dragons, right? Remnants of our DNA memory from what like before the reset, or like maybe giants did exist before the reset. Maybe dragons existed before the reset. Maybe
I mean,
before one of
maybe.
the resets. Maybe there's been like maybe we're thinking like two resets ago.
So, so you think dragons could have potentially been real?
I think that probably not fire breathing dragons. No,
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, you think dragons could have been potentially alongside humans a long time ago?
yeah, I think humans have been around for a long time.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting to think about because in my head, I always thought that dragons were like one of the most ridiculous cryptids. But then I thought about it like as I got older, and I was like, well, why does every culture pretty much have a dragon? Like almost every single culture that's conquered the world or come close to it or has been even conquered itself has a dragon. Why do they all have dragons? Especially because it's like it's a mythological thing. It's not like we're talking about a unicorn, but it's like it's close to being like a unicorn because it's a thing that's like what we have, but it's so specific. But unicorns aren't in like all mythologies. Like there's not a horned
Think about it
horse
like
in
this,
all
right?
mythologies. You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to
Think about it
say?
like this, right? Imagine this: you have like a rodent, right, and then you have a bat. Then you have like either like a lizard or like a Komodo dragon or like a crocodile or you have a snake, and then you have a dragon. Or you can just call it a drake because it's not fire breathing. Just call it whatever you want.
Just call it a drake. I don't know. I think it's fascinating the idea that like maybe dragons existed, but I wish that there was some like evidence. And you know what the evidence could be? It's that we found these fossils and they were wings, but we didn't think that maybe they were like the dragon wings. I don't know. The fact that we haven't found any dragon fossils, I really don't understand what they would be at that point. Unless,
Have we found
unless,
fossils for everything that's existed? Like, does everything get a
no,
fossil?
no, but if like supposedly dragons have like this really tough outer shell and a really soft inner core. So like wouldn't that outer shell have survived and have been fossilized? I feel like it would have. I feel like there would be some evidence somewhere besides drawings of fossilized dragons if they were a thing. You know what I was thinking even is that dragons in fiction, and you've probably thought of this and you might have even been getting at this too, is that dragons in like different fiction could just have been um just like reptilian aliens, and the fact that they fly was only due to the maybe they had like jetpacks or something like that. And then the ancients
What?
interpreted this fire
Wait, hold
breathing
on.
and yeah, maybe the ancients
Yo,
interpreted this fire breathing and this flying as being like a dragon, like a reptilian fire breathing dragon. And they could shoot lasers and they didn't understand that. So said they were fire breathing. You know what I'm saying?
kinda, kinda, yeah. I mean, they could, if that's the case, then they could have also just confused flying like jet-like air vehicles and spaceships that fired weapons as dragons.
Well, yeah, and that's another theory too. But the fact that like aliens could potentially just look alien to us, we could look at them and think maybe they look like dragons too, if we see one,
Well,
but it would
a
make
big part about
sense.
dragon mythology, though, is that like we hunt them, we gotta kill the dragon, and like if if in what if we just killed all the dragons?
Yeah, but what would we have done with their bones and remnants? We would have had like dragon skulls everywhere because people would have wanted to be like, yeah, we killed a dragon. You know what I mean? You
Would they still be around if we're talking 200,000 years ago?
maybe, but all right. So like what I'm thinking of is the fact that, like, all right, Plymouth Rock, right? From 13 colonies, there was that Plymouth Rock place, right? Well,
Yeah.
there was a famous guy from Plymouth called Metacomet. If I'm not mistaken, they took his head and they cut it off and they put it on a pike, and it was there for literally like decades, just sitting in the town center, just rotting on a pike. The colonists, they felt a little bit of pride about doing that. Imagine if these people, these ancient people, took out dragons, how much pride they would feel. They would want to use the bones for everything. They would want to go it everywhere, I feel like. They would want to integrate it into society. I don't know. I feel like there should be more dragon skulls everywhere if dragons are real. I don't I'm not discounting the dragons could be real, but I think that there needs to be more like evidence for that. Like I I'm almost like I think dragons are like Bigfoot almost. And I almost feel like that's more of a diss on Bigfoot than it is on dragons. I actually think that's actually pro dragon in that scenario because Bigfoot just seems so plausible. But we found no evidence for him, so it just seems like it's just like a wild goose chase, so to speak.
Yeah, but like think about all the humans that have lived and how we're like just barely able to find like these like links to past versions of ourselves.
And that's true. And you've got places like the Library of Alexandria that burnt down to the ground that contain like all of like human knowledge to that point. Like
Isn't I
there's
think it's
so
just I
much that
feel
we
like
could have figured out.
fossils are just like pretty rare occasions. We're lucky that we get fossils.
You think so? You think that that's what it is? Or maybe we just don't dig down deep enough. And maybe when we started digging down deep enough, the government found all of the dragon fossils and they decided to cover it up because dragons just seem too crazy.
Maybe there's magical power to the bones of a dragon.
Oh, yeah, I
Keep
never
that
thought
in mind.
about that. They do say that in fiction. I think we just cracked the case.
I would love for dragons to be real.
Yeah, me too.
As scary as that would be, I would love it.
I would love for dragons to have been real.
I would love for them to have been real and to like find out that like, oh yeah, we they existed at one point. That would be awesome. I agree. What
Yeah.
I would not love, what I would really not love, would to just have always been existing in a world that had dragons and they're currently existing as a current problem. Don't want
Yeah,
that.
well, that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
I would
I don't,
rather I would rather find out that dragons existed and they still exist and now they're a problem
all right.
than
Well, here,
have it always because at least I get the satisfaction of always wanting to know about dragons and then finding out they were real.
I,
As
hey,
long as I get that satisfaction.
I think I have a good question for everything that we've talked about today and up to this point in the entire show. So, what would be your opinion? All right, here's a hypothetical for you. Maybe you know where this is going, maybe you don't. But here's a hypothetical for you. Let's say tomorrow we find out that dragons were actually real. They were real things, like down to a T, fire breathing dragons that could fly around, like
How
as real as the driven snow. Like, let's say
how could they breathe fire? How?
I don't know, but let's just say biologically they figure it out. Like maybe it's, how there's those bugs that can shoot out sulfur. Maybe it's something like that where it can generate like some kind of sulfur vomit or something like that. I don't know. But let's say hypothetically we find out tomorrow that dragons are real, and then the first thing they want to do, the first thing that they say they want to do with that information and that DNA that they've acquired is they want to clone all the dragons that they can, and they want to open up a park of all cloned dragons. Do you think that would
Hmm?
be a good idea? Do you think cloning
Fantastic
dragons
idea.
would be a good idea? You think cloning dragons would be a genuinely a good idea? I
Yeah,
don't think that would
we
be a
should
good
definitely
idea.
do that.
I think we should clone dinosaurs before we clone dragons. And that being said, a dragon would just be a dinosaur, but I think we'd have a better chance cloning most other dinosaurs than cloning a dragon.
I think if we can clone a dragon, we should be making a King Kong.
We should be making a King Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we're just creating fictional creatures at that point. You know that they want to clone, or not clone, but like they want to genetically engineer a unicorn, right? That's something I was
Yeah.
going to mention earlier. You heard
Yeah.
that, right?
I've
Yeah.
heard of that.
That's crazy. That's essentially that's playing God now. If we're making a real King Kong, we've passed the point of like now we're just playing God. Like bringing back things to life. You know what I mean? We thought that was, playing God, taking an animal out of extinction. That is playing God. But actually creating things in the image that we created them in is the literal definition of a godlike behavior. And I think if we do that, if we start cloning mythological, or sorry, we start genetically engineering mythological creatures to be real, I think we'll get into a really bad gray area. I think the idea of genetically engineering a unicorn, a horse with a head on it. It's a whimsical, it's a funny idea, but it's really knocking on something really almost deadly, like a not it's not knocking on something good. You know what I mean? It's knocking on some dangerous territory. If we start creating all these mythological creatures, let's say dragons are not real completely not real. But let's say tomorrow we decide to take some kind of alligator or lizard DNA, like just a bunch of lizard DNA, and combine it with some dinosaur DNA and create our own version of like a dragon. I don't think that's a good
All right.
idea. I
So
think that is a bad idea. I think that's what they're trying to do with the unicorn, too. They're trying to take all this different DNA and create this different thing that they think not existed, but they want to exist.
why not?
I don't think it's a good idea.
Let's make these mythical creatures that are in our stories. Let's
So
become
let's
the
just
gods of our own
genetically
story.
engineer Bigfoot. What's the issue with that? Right?
Exactly. Unless he's sentient, and then we need to like meet that.
But that's what I was just going to say is that Bigfoot might be a link between humanity and an ape. And if we create something that is that close to a human being, is that right? Should we be creating things that are half human, half ape, half half human, half dog? You know what I mean? Should we be creating these like and that's what scientists
We
want to
would be
do. They're
the Anunnaki.
talking about it. But that's what I'm saying. And that's not a good thing. I don't like that. I don't like that future. I don't want a future where we decide that we fall in love with our dog, so we decide to make human dog hybrids in a lab for this weird woman who fell in love with her dog. You know what I mean? I don't want this shit. I don't want to grow up with some dude whose name's Scruffy and who looks like he's got a bunch of patches of fur and looks
Some
all
guy named Brian.
freak. Some guy named what?
Brian.
Yeah, some guy named Brian who drinks all day and, spouts off about his political agenda and talks about a book that he's always writing but never finishes. I don't want to deal with these people in my life. I deal with that enough in my own life because I already have those problems. I'm not an alcoholic, but I constantly talk about books that I'm never going to finish. This is a
Can
real
you
issue.
look up something for me, and then like I'll connect it back to what we're talking about.
I was really on a roll here, but all right. What
Look up look up
what is it?
giant giant snake photograph from plane.
I know what you're talking about. The Nazca lines.
No.
Oh, just
Click
a
on it.
giant snake?
No, but like click click on one that has like references to like the sizes of the things that are also in the photo.
What, you don't think Instagram is a good enough reference?
No, but it doesn't show you that like those little pieces of like plant next to it are all trees.
It's wow, that's crazy. The snake was described as being close to 50 feet to Air Force pilot Remy Van. Yeah, so that's a road right next that it's sitting on.
Yes,
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, that's a big snake. But
that's
that,
fucking that.
but
Now imagine that with wings.
yeah, I don't want to. I don't want them to do this. I don't want them to create all these mythological creatures and like start fucking with the gene pool. I have you ever seen Jurassic World?
Yeah,
That was a rhetorical question. Of course you've seen Jurassic World. That's
who hasn't?
exactly. Everybody's seen Jurassic World. It's the top selling movie of all time. That's like saying that you haven't seen Star Wars, except people who haven't seen Star Wars have even seen Jurassic World. You'd have to be a loser to never see Jurassic World and living
Yeah,
under
you
a
know what? You know
rock.
what? Come on. It's like people. It's like how everybody has seen Happy Feet.
Oh yeah, I love Happy Feet. Exactly. I love the part with the Somebody to Love. That was a good part of Happy Feet. Remember that with the
Everybody,
song?
everybody's seen Happy Feet, but not everyone has seen Surfs Up.
Surf's Up was good with Shia LaBeouf. That was good. But hey, we're getting off track here. We'll talk about the Penguins another day.
So, well, hold on. About that giant snake, right? Imagine with wings, right?
I just want to say one
What?
day we should have an episode where we dedicate it to all of our favorite fictional penguins. But go on.
Mine is probably Gunther from Adventure Time.
I love the Madagascar penguins. They're probably my favorite.
All right, so like Eastern dragons.
Yeah.
You know how they don't have wings,
Yeah.
but you know what
They
they
still
do?
fly though.
They still fly and they kind of like slither and coil like snakes. They
Oh
look like
yeah, that's
snakes that
true.
fly. But you know that there is a flying snake?
Is there?
Yeah. You know how it
Where is
flies?
it? How do they fly?
It's more like a flying squirrel, and it jumps from trees, and it's not like a regular round body. It's actually kind of flat, and it slithers with its flat body through
Is it
the air.
poisonous?
I don't know, actually. That's something you should look this up. Look up a video of it. Look up a video of a flying snake. Now watch out.
Huh. Haha. Wow. That's pretty
So
crazy, honestly.
what if what if Eastern dragons, right, were
Yep.
just giant snakes that were flying and they flew by just jumping off of mountains?
That would make a lot of sense, honestly.
They always dwelled up in mountains.
That would be terrifying too. I would hate to see like a giant flying snake.
There are also tales about dragons in, like the ocean. Dragons and also like ocean dragons. That's just sea snakes.
Well, like serpents.
Yeah, sea serpents.
Yeah. Hey, look at the Google symbol today.
What is that?
I don't know. Rise of the half moon.
It's a pretty creepy picture.
It is. April's lunar cycle has reached its final quarter half moon phase. Oh, also, aren't we in like the period of ball right now? Yeah, we're I'm pretty sure we're in the period of ball.
What does that mean? What is that supposed to mean?
The ball cycle. No, that's not it. Well, from what I heard, um, so like from what I heard, there was a time in late spring. It was like up to May Day where you were supposed to you were basically supposed to you were supposed to worship Baal at this time, and it was like,
You're supposed to sacrifice a child.
yeah, all right, here it is. April 19th initiates a 13-day period known in the occult as the blood sacrifice, halfway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. So that's why they say like a lot of bad shit happens like during like this time, like Hitler's birthday was 420 and the Columbine massacre, and like all these like crazy terrorist attacks have happened in like April, and like all this wild shit happens in like April, and you don't even think about it, but like they say that it's because of like the dark energy of like of this blood sacrifice like time.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, Easter. I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about Christianity or Catholicism. In Easter, it's supposed to be about the resurrection of Jesus. Is that correct?
Easter, yeah.
Um, when was that resurrection like just a few days after his death?
See?
So couldn't you
Yeah,
add
it was like 3 days,
couldn't
or
you add
was it?
the death?
Yeah.
Can you add the death of Jesus to being in this time frame?
Well, that's what I was thinking too. So it says April 19th is not a meaningful date to most, but to occultists and worshippers of Baal, it is a most auspicious time. Halfway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice, it marked the first day of summer in ancient times, initiating a 13-day period known in the occult as the blood sacrifice to the beast. This period culminates in Beltane, the major festival for the worship of Baal, or as it is known in the Western world, May Day. The Temple of Baal, built 2,000 years ago to
Whoa.
honor the god of orgies, was was the stage for this pagan festival in ancient times. This time period of the blood sacrifice was so significant that after the pagans, the Romans celebrated a festival of fertility called Fordycidia on the same dates, beginning April 15th and ending April 19th with the festival of Cerealia. Baal, worshipped by the Mesopotamians, was a major influence in ancient times. Mentioned more than 90 times in the Bible, most notably when Elijah defeated the priests of Baal in a contest to bring down fire from heaven to burn a sacrifice. Baal became the archetypal form of idol worship. Followers of Baal engaged in orgies and sacrificed human, you know, burning them alive. Pantheistic, they worship Mother Nature while denying the existence of a creator. And this is all coming from maybe a biased source, so keep all that in mind. But it seems like it's actually like pretty interesting. Though worshipping Baal and other idols is not especially prevalent in Western culture today, their holidays persist, taking on different meanings but retaining some of their ancient symbols and meaning. Fertility is symbolized in the westernized version of the May Day holiday by the phallic maypole ceremony. Bonfires, another prominent aspect of May Day celebrations, are reminiscent of the fires used for sacrifices, we'll say. Beltane, an anglicized reference to the god Baal, is still observed throughout Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man. At the same time, the Ark of Palmyra, Temple of Bel, is standing in Trafalgar Square. The Beltane Fire Festival will be the Beltane Fire Festival will be held on the other side of England, Edinburgh. Beltane fire festivals are in fact held all over the world, perpetuated as part of an ancient Gaelic culture. In an unfortunate misunderstanding of the festival's roots, they are frequently billed as family events, with children being given special discounts. Okay, then now it's starting to get into a little bit more biased stuff, but you get the idea that there was, you know, April 19th.
I'm surprised I've never heard of that before. That's really interesting. I'm surprised you liked the Eastern dragons were flying snakes. I'm
I
surprised you
like
liked
that a
that. Like
lot, honestly. That
that's
that
that's a crazy idea. I've told my friends for a long time.
I'll be honest with you, that's the only way. Like, you know how you told me that reptilians being dinosaurs that evolved is the only way that you want to think about reptilians, or the only way you would
Yeah,
think about that. What you described as dragons is is how is basically the exact same way I feel about that.
yeah. It's not even that. Like it's not how the only way I would believe it. It's the way I want to believe it. Like I want it to be that.
Well,
If
to
it had
me,
to be real,
it
I
just
want it to be
like it.
evolved dinosaurs.
Well, oh, that, yeah. Well, I was gonna, yeah, that's how I feel about the snakes. Like, if dragons were actually snakes that were just really big and could potentially fly, okay. Thank God they're not around now, but okay, that makes sense. That would make sense why we don't have fossils of them. That would make sense why, you know what I mean? All this stuff, just like, you know what I mean? It would make a
Yeah,
lot of sense in so many different ways. It would also make sense because of Venom. You know what I mean? That they could have been like fire breathing, even. Like that could have just been
you think so?
misconstrued as the venom, or like I said earlier, like the sulfur thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Who knows?
I think when it comes to fire breathing dragons, I want them to be like how George R. R. Martin wants them to be, with the wings are like part of the front uh limbs. So it's not like there's like it has four legs and then it also has a pair of wings. It's like the two front legs are the wings too. Like a
Mm.
bird, like a bat, it's biologically correct. And I think just like a lot of different versions of dragons, especially in fiction, describe the flames as having like it's like there's a gas that these lizards produce, and then they can kind of like click and like maybe even just spark the gas, so it just produces a flame. They can spray that gas out, or maybe it's a liquid, and they can spray it after lighting a flame with a click,
Hey,
and then they can just shoot that flame out.
yo,
I think that's super far fetched. At the same time, I think it's far fetched.
you know what I don't think is far fetched. I think potentially a dragon that, and you know, no, what you're saying is not that far fetched. A dragon or like an ancient giant reptile that produced a gas, a methane gas that could maybe potentially scratch some rocks, maybe, and produce a
Yeah,
spark that lights up fire around it could totally be plausible. And I never thought about that in my entire life, but that 100% could be what dragons were. And
it could
I
be
think,
that, or like I said, it could be something that's sparking inside of itself.
yeah, but honestly, I think it producing a gas and then like even just like scratching some rocks and just making sparks just make total sense because there's there's animals that have that kind of built-in like survival instincts that utilize certain things that they produce in certain ways. Like that flying snake that we just saw. That's literally evolution in action, but it's
Yeah,
utilizing the tree and the air, not just the air, but the tree too. The tree went into the evolution's process
that
along with the air.
here's something else interesting: the connection between dragons and volcanoes.
What's that?
And well, just the idea that what if there's lizards that survived in super hot conditions
Well, there's
and they can
snails.
handle the there's snails,
There's a volcanic
but what if
snail, yeah.
that's cool? There's a Pokemon based on that.
Is there?
Yeah,
A scaly gastropod. That's one of the ugliest but most badass looking. Actually, it's not even that ugly. It's pretty fucking badass looking. Really.
It is badass looking.
Yeah, it's not even ugly. It literally looks like a snail that crawled out of hell.
Yeah, it looks cool. It looks like an alien, like from the movie Alien.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It looks like I would not want to see that thing.
This is like the parasite that's in the piss of the alien from Alien.